The proximity alert blared through the Horizon's command deck as Captain Alina Chen studied the sensor readings with narrowed eyes. "What am I looking at, Dr. Kepper?" she asked, gesturing at the crystalline structures floating in the void ahead. Dr. Amrita Kapoor, the ship's xenobiologist, adjusted her spectacles. "If I didn't know better, I'd say they were mineral formations. But minerals don't typically arrange themselves in perfect dodecahedrons or maintain position against stellar wind." The Horizon had ventured farther than any human vessel before, testing Earth's experimental Hawking drive that bent space through artificial microsingularities. Their mission, a 6-month survey of a promising star system near Andromeda's outer rim. Nobody had anticipated first contact. "They're moving," Lieutenant Manuel Santos announced from Tactical, his voice steady despite the tension radiating through the bridge. "Forming a perimeter around us." The crystalline structures, initially scattered, realigned with mathematical precision. The largest, nearly the size of the Horizon itself, positioned directly ahead. "Comms are receiving something," Communications Officer Fatima Ndiaye reported. "It's not radio. Not any EM spectrum we recognize." She hesitated. "Captain, I feel it more than hear it. Like a vibration inside my skull." Before Chen could respond, every screen on the bridge flickered and died. The ship's hum faded as system after system went offline. Only life support and emergency lighting remained. "Defensive measures," Chen ordered, but Santos shook his head helplessly as his console went dark. The air before Chen's command chair shimmered, coalescing into a translucent projection of a being unlike anything in humanity's scientific records. 12 feet tall with a body that seemed composed entirely of interlocking crystal facets, it possessed no recognizable features except for a symmetrical array of pulsing lights where a face might be. Humans, the being communicated, not through sound, but through a disturbing resonance that all bridge crew felt simultaneously within their minds. Primitive design. Unexpected capabilities. How did you achieve transition space travel without resonant crystal technology? Chen's instincts screamed danger. The dismissive tone, the casual demonstration of power by disabling their ship. She recognized the tactics of someone accustomed to dominance. "This is Captain Alina Chen of the Earth exploration vessel Horizon," she replied, directing her words to the projection despite the absence of visible ears. "We come in peace and with respect for all sentient species we may encounter." A sensation like cold fingers probing her thoughts made Chen wince. Around the bridge, crew members clutched their heads in discomfort. "Captain," Dr. Kapper whispered urgently. "They're attempting some form of telepathic scan." The crystal being tilted what might be considered its head. "Your minds are chaotic, undisciplined, yet resistant." A note of surprise entered the mental communication. Chen felt the probing intensify, becoming painful. Crew members gasped around her. Acting on instinct, she didn't fight the intrusion, but instead focused on a childhood memory. Her grandmother teaching her to play the violin, the complex emotions of frustration and joy, the feeling of the bow across strings. The crystalline being recoiled visibly, the lights in its face flaring brightly. The telepathic pressure vanished instantly. "Interesting," it communicated, a new note of caution in the mental voice. "Supreme Overseer Vaxillion will want to study this anomaly personally." The projection expanded, revealing what had been hidden beyond the crystalline formation. A vast armada of ships, each a masterpiece of geometric precision, stretching as far as the eye could see. "You will accompany us to Crystallis Prime," the being stated. Not a request, an expectation of obedience. Chen stood, straightening her uniform. 20 years of diplomatic training had prepared her for many scenarios, but none quite like this. She had seconds to decide humanity's first official response to an advanced alien species clearly accustomed to being obeyed. She stepped forward and extended her hand, a gesture of peace older than recorded history. "We would be honored to learn about your civilization," she said, meeting the pulsing lights that served as the being's eyes. but as equals, not as specimens. The crystalline being seemed to freeze, as though encountering a concept entirely foreign to its understanding. Equals. The mental voice carried genuine confusion. How amusing. We are Cephraxians, architects of 1,000 worlds, masters of matter and mind. You will learn your place in the cosmic hierarchy. The horizon shuddered as an invisible force began pulling it toward the waiting armada. Chen's hand remained extended, unwavering. I believe, she said with a calm she didn't entirely feel, that you'll find humans don't have a fixed place in anyone's hierarchy. It's what makes us who we are. Crystallis Prime loomed before them, a planet-sized geode that refracted starlight into prismatic beams that stretched for thousands of miles. The horizon, now escorted by Cephraxian vessels, approached a massive opening that dilated like a crystalline iris. It's beautiful, breathed Dr. Marcus Way, who had joined the hastily assembled diplomatic team. An expert in xenobiology, with a classified background in military threat assessment, Way's apparent wonder was genuine despite his analytical purpose. Lieutenant Ibrahima Diallo stood beside him at the viewport, his expression carefully neutral. As head of security, he'd insisted on accompanying Captain Chen, despite her protests about keeping the delegation small. What Chen didn't know was that Diallo possessed a rare empathic sensitivity that Earth's military had been studying, an ability he'd spent a lifetime dismissing as exceptionally good intuition. Beautiful things are often the most dangerous, Diallo murmured, a prickling sensation at the base of his skull warning him something was deeply wrong with this invitation. The ship passed through the iris into a cavernous docking bay where everything, from the architecture to the smaller Cephraxians moving about their tasks, exhibited perfect mathematical symmetry. A delegation awaited them, led by a Cephraxian whose crystalline body contained more facets than the others, intricate patterns spiraling across its surface. Commander Zerithia, it introduced itself as the humans disembarked, the mental voice somehow more melodic than their first contact. I will escort you to appropriate accommodations and provide protective garments. Protective garments? Chen questioned. Our atmosphere contains microscopic crystalline particulates necessary for our existence, but potentially abrasive to organic tissue over prolonged exposure, Zerithia explained. A simple precaution. Wei's eyes narrowed imperceptibly. The commander's explanation made scientific sense, but something felt rehearsed about it. They were led through corridors that seemed to shift subtly as they walked, creating an unsettling sense of spatial disorientation. Diallo noticed how each junction presented identical options, a masterfully subtle way to ensure visitors could never navigate independently. Their quarters resembled a museum display of Earth environments, obviously constructed from intercepted transmissions and containing jarring inaccuracies. Palm trees stood beside pine, and what appeared to be a refrigerator hummed beside a coal stove. The Supreme Overseer will receive you after a rest period, Zerithia announced. These will protect you during your stay. She presented crystalline suits that resembled second skins. Once alone, Wai immediately examined the suit, using portable equipment smuggled in his medical kit. Interesting, he whispered, showing Chen and Diallo his findings. These contain monitoring filaments, essentially full biometric surveillance, and these nodules along the neural pathways. They emit frequencies that could influence thought patterns. Are you certain? Chen asked. I designed similar prototypes for deep space psychological stabilization, Wei admitted, revealing part of his classified background. These are more advanced, but the principle is identical. Diallo paced the room, running his fingers along the walls. They're watching us now. Not just visually. I can feel attention focused on us. His empathic sense had grown stronger since entering Cephraxian space, as though something in their environment amplified it. Then let's give them something to watch, Chen decided. She donned the suit but allowed Wei to neutralize the cognitive influence nodes with a carefully calibrated electromagnetic pulse from his modified communicator. Hours later, they were separated for what were described as standard compatibility assessments. Chen found herself in a chamber where holographic projections suddenly surrounded her. Earth, seen from orbit, beautiful and blue. Then missiles rising from Suffraxian ships, the planet cracking like an egg. An interesting simulation, she said calmly, though her heart raced. Is this meant to frighten me? Merely to establish baseline emotional responses, came Supreme Overseer Vexilion's mental voice as he materialized beside her. Taller than any Suffraxian they'd seen, his crystalline form so complex it hurt the eyes to look at him directly. You display unusual composure, he noted, waving a limb to dissolve the apocalyptic imagery. Most species become immediately submissive when shown their planetary vulnerability. Humans have imagined our own extinction many times, Chen replied. We've made art about it, prepared for it, and worked to prevent it. Facing our fears is something of a species trait. Vexillion's form shifted, facets realigning to create what might have been an expression of amusement. He gestured, and a solid metallic cube appeared floating between them. With no visible effort, he compressed it until it imploded with a thunderous crack. Power, he communicated, is the universal language. The Suffraxian hegemony has spoken this language fluently for 10,000 years. Chen nodded thoughtfully, then reached for her water container. She took a small sip, then placed it on a nearby surface. The water inside began to rise against gravity, forming a perfect sphere that floated upward. Humans speak many languages, she replied, including some that even the masters of matter might find interesting. The water manipulation was a crude trick, Dr. Wei admitted as the delegation regrouped in their quarters. Nanoscale magnetic manipulators in her sleeve cuff, interacting with the ferrofluid I added to her water supply. But it worked, Chen replied, removing the small device. Vexillion's reaction confirmed what I suspected. They've never encountered technology that approaches problems from our angle. They're powerful, but predictable. Diello stood by the viewport, watching crystalline ships depart from a distant launch bay. 3 vessels just left on a tight formation trajectory. Military precision. His empathic senses had been picking up increasing levels of what he could only describe as anticipation from their hosts. Heading? Chen asked sharply. Can't be certain, but... Diello hesitated. Based on the stellar positioning charts we reviewed before arrival, that vector could intercept Earth in approximately 2 weeks at their demonstrated FTL capabilities. Wei activated his modified scanner, sweeping it across the room in a pattern that appeared casual but was methodically thorough. He paused as the device registered a faint anomaly in the corner ceiling. We're being monitored, he mouthed silently, then spoke aloud. Captain, I'm concerned about the atmospheric irritants affecting my respiratory system. Perhaps we should request additional protective measures. Chen nodded, understanding the ruse. I'll speak with Commander Zarithia about it. While Wei created electromagnetic interference with his scanner, Diallo retrieved a small pouch from his boot and removed what appeared to be ordinary clay. He quickly molded it into a small disc and pressed it against the hidden monitoring device Wei had located. 20 seconds of looped conversation, he whispered. Earth counterintelligence tech. With their privacy temporarily secured, Shen activated a holographic star chart from her modified communicator. If those ships are heading to Earth, we need to warn Home Command. The horizon is still locked down, and all our long-range communications are being intercepted, Wei said grimly. I've detected quantum entanglement relays throughout this facility. They're not just monitoring us. They're studying how we think. Diallo's expression darkened. I need to show you something. He retrieved his personal tablet and displayed images he'd surreptitiously captured during their tour of the facility. These weren't random architectural details. Look closer. The images showed what initially appeared to be crystalline art installations, but when viewed with Wei's scanner overlay, revealed themselves as stasis chambers. Inside each, barely discernible, were preserved specimens of different alien species. Trophies, Chen breathed, horror dawning on her face. Or a zoo, Wei suggested. But either way, we're being evaluated for the collection, Deo finished. A soft chime indicated someone approaching their quarters. They quickly resumed casual positions as Commander Zerethia entered, her crystalline form glimmering with subdued pulses of light. "The Supreme Overseer requests your presence at the Observation Nexus," she announced. "A rare honor for visiting species." "We're honored," Chen replied smoothly. "May I ask about the vessels we observed departing?" Scientific expedition. A flicker, almost imperceptible, passed through Zerithia's crystalline structure. Routine patrol. The hegemony maintains order through vigilance. As they followed Zerethia through the shifting corridors, Diallo intentionally lagged behind, pretending to admire a particularly complex crystal formation. His empathic senses had detected something unusual from Zerethia. Not the cold calculation he'd felt from Vaxillion, but something more complex. Uncertainty. Conflict. The observation nexus proved to be a vast dome atop the highest spire of the Crystal City. Stars shone unfiltered through the transparent ceiling, while below, holographic displays showed thousands of worlds. The extent of Xafraxian influence. Impressive, Wei commented, though his eyes were rapidly cataloging the information displayed about each system, storing it for later analysis. 347 species have been cataloged, studied, and assigned their proper place in the cosmic hierarchy, Vaxillion announced, his imposing form materializing from a column of light. "Yours will be the 348th. Chen noticed a subtle change in the displays. Several showed monitoring feeds of Earth cities. Sydney, Lagos, Tokyo, Moscow. Recent feeds. "You've been observing us for some time," she noted, keeping her tone conversational while her mind raced. "Knowledge precedes integration," Vaxillion replied. He gestured toward one display showing what appeared to be a laboratory. Inside, a team of Xafraxian scientists surrounded an examination table bearing a disturbing sight, a partially dissected body with distinctly human-like features. "Your genetic cousins from the Proxima system proved inadequate for higher functions," Vaxillion continued casually. "We have higher hopes for Earth-straying humans." Diallo felt a sudden spike of emotion from Commander Zerethia, something that translated in his mind as shame. Her crystalline fingers twitched in a pattern that seemed deliberate, directed subtly toward them. A warning. Back on Earth, Dr. Samira Khoury stared at her atmospheric monitoring equipment in confusion. What had initially registered as a meteor shower approaching Earth's outer atmosphere had suddenly altered course. Not once, but 3 times in perfect synchronization. "General Harrison," she called, not taking her eyes off the display. "I think you need to see this." The grizzled head of Earth's newly formed Space Defense Initiative frowned at the trajectory plots. "Those aren't natural objects." "No, sir," Khoury agreed. "And based on their deceleration pattern, they'll achieve stable orbit in approximately 6 hours. Harrison's jaw tightened. "Initiate Protocol Sentinel." Quietly. Across the globe, deep space monitoring stations switched to high alert, and experimental defense systems, developed after the Horizon's departure, were brought online. Humanity had long prepared for this moment, though few believed it would come so soon. On Crystallis Prime, the diplomatic meeting had developed into something far more ominous. A contest of species, Vaxillion announced, his crystalline form radiating cold light across the ceremonial chamber, where dignitaries from various subjugated worlds watched from tiered observation platforms. An ancient tradition by which the hegemony determines the proper placement of newly discovered intelligences. Chen kept her expression neutral, though internally she calculated the implications. "And if we decline this tradition?" A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through the assembled Xafraxians. "Decline?" Vaxillion's mental voice reverberated with mock confusion. "No species declines. The alternative is immediate classification as resource biomass." We subtly moved closer to Chen. "Captain," he whispered, "I believe resource biomass translates to planetary harvesting in diplomatic terms." The terms. Chen asked loudly, ignoring shocked murmurs from the alien observers at her directness. 3 trials, Vaxillian explained. Mind, body, and spirit. Succeed, and humanity will be recognized as a level 3 civilization with limited autonomy under hegemony guidance. Fail. He gestured to a holographic display showing Earth, surrounded by the 3 Xafraxian vessels now in orbit. Extraction begins immediately. Diallo's empathic senses overwhelmed him with a collective anticipation from the assembled Xafraxians. They'd seen this ceremony countless times, always with the same outcome. No species had ever progressed beyond level 2 classification. We accept, Chen replied firmly. With one condition. A crystalline sound like shattering glass echoed through the chamber. Xafraxian laughter. Conditions. Vaxillian's tone hardened. You misunderstand your position, human. Perhaps, Chen conceded, but fairness benefits even the supremely confident, doesn't it? I simply propose that the trials test both species equally. Challenges that don't inherently favor Xafraxian biology or technology. A murmur passed through the crowd. Diallo sensed a shift in the emotional current, curiosity, even respect from some observers. Interesting, Vaxillian considered, facets shifting in complex patterns. Your species displays unusual confidence, despite obvious inferiority. Very well. The trial of mind will involve a universal mathematical challenge within the crystal labyrinth. The trial of body will occur in the flux arena, where fundamental constants shift unpredictably. The trial of spirit will test your mental resilience through direct consciousness interfacing. Diallo felt a gentle pressure against his mind, different from the invasive probes they'd experienced earlier. Turning slightly, he saw Commander Zerithia watching him intently from across the chamber. A series of distinct thoughts, not his own, formed in his consciousness. The spirit trial, sabotage, lethal to non-crystalline minds. Vaxillian fears. The contact broke as Zerithia turned away, approached by another Xafraxian official. We accept these terms, Chen declared. Dr. Wei will undertake the trial of mind, Lieutenant Diallo the trial of body, and I will face the trial of spirit. Then let the contest begin, Vaxillian announced. Prepare the labyrinth. As the chamber emptied, Wei was escorted toward a massive crystalline structure that reconfigured itself continuously, pathways appearing and disappearing in hypnotic patterns. Before being separated, Diallo managed to grasp Chen's arm. Captain, I received a warning. The spirit trial has been rigged to be fatal. Chen's eyes hardened with resolve rather than fear. Then we need to win the first 2 trials convincingly. And I need to find a way to survive the impossible. As Wei approached the entrance to the labyrinth, he touched the small pendant around his neck, a miniaturized quantum communicator disguised as a religious symbol. If he could reach the center, perhaps the mathematical challenge would provide an opportunity to send a message to Earth. The human will now enter, announced a Xafraxian protocol officer. As is tradition, no being has ever solved the equation at the labyrinth's heart. Should you somehow reach it, that alone would be unprecedented. Wei smiled tightly. I've always enjoyed being unprecedented. He stepped through the threshold, which sealed behind him with a crystalline chime. The contest had begun. The crystal labyrinth shifted around Dr. Wei, corridors realigning with musical chimes that resonated through the structure. What initially appeared random gradually revealed its pattern. The pathways responded to his thoughts, reconfiguring based on his problem-solving approach. Fascinating, Wei muttered, running his fingers along the wall that hummed beneath his touch. The crystalline matrix is quantum-sensitive to neural patterns. He stopped walking and deliberately changed his thinking strategy. Instead of seeking the most direct path, he visualized a musical composition, Bach's Goldberg variations flowing through his mind in mathematical precision. The labyrinth shuddered, corridors suddenly aligning in a spiral pattern that hadn't existed moments before. Just as I thought. Wei smiled. It's designed to trap those who think linearly. In the observation chamber, Vaxillian watched with narrowed luminescence as the human progressed faster than any previous contestant. "Impossible," hissed a council elder. "He's exploiting a pattern resonance we didn't anticipate." "Because you assumed lesser beings think as we do," Commander Zarithia observed quietly. "Perhaps our understanding of cognition is incomplete." On Earth, the first sign of Saphraxian presence came not as an attack, but as a gentle crystalline snowfall over Tokyo. Curious citizens extended hands to catch the shimmering flakes that seemed to evaporate on contact with skin. In her laboratory, Dr. Kauri examined a sample under an electron microscope and recoiled in shock. "They're technological," she reported to General Harrison. "Nanoscale crystal structures, and they're reconfiguring themselves based on cellular contact." "Biological data mining," Harrison concluded grimly. "They're scanning us." Across the city, 16-year-old Miyu Tanaka noticed something odd as she practiced her violin. The crystal particles suspended in her room vibrated in perfect harmony with certain notes, forming geometric patterns in the air. She recorded the phenomenon on her phone, uploading it with the caption, "Crystal snow responds to a minor scale. Anyone else seeing this?" Within an hour, musicians worldwide were experimenting with the effect. Wei reached the center of the labyrinth where a geometric shape hovered in midair, a constantly morphing crystalline structure representing what the Saphraxians considered their most complex mathematical theorem. "The equation cannot be solved," intoned the disembodied voice. "Its purpose is to demonstrate the futility of lesser cognition when confronted with supreme intelligence." Wei circled the floating equation form, recognizing elements of multidimensional calculus merged with quantum principles beyond Earth's current mathematical language. Yet something about it seemed familiar. The way it pulsed and shifted reminded him of something. "It's not an equation at all," he realized suddenly. "It's a crystallized thought pattern." Drawing on his classified research into consciousness mapping, Wei understood what no other contestant had seen. The challenge wasn't to solve an equation but to communicate with it. He closed his eyes and began to hum the Bach piece he'd visualized earlier, matching his brainwaves to the harmonic resonance of the crystal. The equation form pulsed in response, gradually synchronizing to his mental rhythm. In the observation chamber, Saphraxians watched in stunned silence as the mathematical construct began transforming, simplifying itself into a harmonically perfect geometric form that chimed with resonant beauty. "What is happening?" demanded Vaxillian. "He's singing to it," Zarithia replied in wonder. While Wei confronted the mathematical challenge, Lieutenant Diallo was led to a different section of the complex. The flux arena loomed before him, a massive hexagonal chamber where the very fabric of reality seemed to ripple and distort. 347 species have attempted this trial, his Saphraxian guide informed him. None have survived beyond 6 minutes. The record is 5 minutes and 43 seconds. Diallo observed the chamber's shifting patterns, his empathic senses detecting something the Saphraxians hadn't intended. The fluctuations weren't random but cyclic, like ocean waves with underlying currents. "What causes the fluctuations?" he asked casually. "The arena amplifies and randomizes fundamental cosmic constants, gravity, electromagnetic force, even temporal flow," the guide explained with pride. "Crystalline physiology can adapt to these changes. Organic beings cannot." Diallo nodded thoughtfully, already mapping the fluctuation patterns in his mind. "We'll see about that." Back in the labyrinth, Wei completed his harmonic communication with the equation form. It had reshaped itself into a perfect dodecahedron that rotated gently, emitting a pleasant tone. "Unprecedented," the voice acknowledged. "The human has not solved the unsolvable, but has transformed it into new understanding." As Wei was escorted from the labyrinth, he discreetly activated his quantum transmitter, sending a compressed data burst containing everything they'd learned about Saphraxian technology and weaknesses. Unknown to the Saphraxians, the transmitter operated on principles similar to the harmonic resonance he'd just demonstrated, allowing the signal to bypass conventional jamming by riding the same quantum frequencies the Xefraxians used for their own communications. The message was brief but critical. Crystal resonance at 440 Hz disrupts their technology. They fear our mental complexity. 3 ships in orbit. Prepare. Lieutenant Diallo stepped into the flux arena, immediately feeling the disorienting shift as gravity fluctuated around him. The air thickened, then thinned, temperature cycling between extremes in unpredictable waves. But Diallo had prepared mentally, drawing on his empathic senses to perceive the underlying patterns. Where others saw chaos, he recognized rhythm. Begin recording, announced a Xefraxian observer. Trial of body. Subject: human designation Ibrahima Diallo. The floor beneath Diallo suddenly liquefied. Instead of struggling against it, he relaxed his body and allowed himself to sink, knowing from the pattern recognition that solidification would follow in approximately 3 seconds. As expected, the surface hardened just as he was submerged to his waist, allowing him to extract himself with calculated movements that conserved energy. 1 minute, called out the timekeeper. The subject remains functional. Vexillion watched with growing concern. Increase fluctuation intensity by 30%. The chamber responded, space itself seeming to ripple around Diallo. A section of the floor vanished beneath him, opening into a void. Rather than grasping desperately at the edge as most species did, Diallo deliberately dove downward into the emptiness. Suicide? Questioned an elder. No, Zerithia replied, understanding before the others. He's anticipating the cycle. Sure enough, as Diallo fell, the spatial distortion reversed. What had been down became up, launching him back into the arena with precisely the momentum needed to land gracefully on a newly formed platform. 3 minutes, announced the timekeeper, a note of surprise evident. On Earth, Miyu Tanaka's discovery had sparked a global phenomenon. Musicians around the world experimented with different frequencies, documenting how the crystalline particles responded. In Lagos, engineers modified radio towers to broadcast the resonant F440 frequency. The crystalline snowfall in their vicinity immediately lost cohesion, falling to the ground as inert dust. Dr. Kauri, working with a hastily assembled team of physicists, identified the precise harmonic series that disrupted the alien technology. It's like finding their operating system's crash code, she explained to General Harrison. These crystals rely on perfect structural integrity. Certain sound frequencies create vibrations that shatter their molecular bonds. Harrison nodded grimly. Weaponize it. Immediately. Within hours, cities worldwide converted everything from concert hall sound systems to emergency broadcast networks into makeshift sonic defense systems. Back on Crystallis Prime, Supreme Overseer Vexillion received disturbing reports from the Earth expedition. The humans are neutralizing our surveillance network, a communications officer reported. They've discovered resonance vulnerability. Impossible, Vexillion hissed. Accelerate the timeline. Begin planetary subjugation immediately. In the command center of the lead vessel orbiting Earth, the Xefraxian commander activated the planet cracker protocols. Massive crystal formations began growing from the ship's hull, aligning into a focused array. But as the weapon powered up, something unexpected happened. The array's crystals began vibrating discordantly, cracks spreading across their perfect surfaces. What's happening? Demanded the commander. The humans, responded his science officer in disbelief. They're broadcasting some kind of interference pattern. It's creating destructive resonance in our crystalline technology. Across Earth, every available speaker, from stadium sound systems to smartphone speakers, broadcast the same A440 tone strengthened by its precise harmonics. In the flux arena, Diallo had surpassed all records, reaching the 12-minute mark as he moved through the chaotic environment with what appeared to spectators as precognitive awareness. He's anticipating the fluctuations, Zerithia observed, not merely reacting. Vexillion, increasingly agitated by reports from Earth, abruptly terminated the trial. "Sufficient," he declared. "The human demonstrates adequate physical adaptation." As Diallo was escorted from the arena, exhausted but triumphant, he caught Xerithia's subtle nod of acknowledgement. "You perceive patterns others cannot," she communicated privately to his mind. "A rare gift even among your kind, I suspect." "Not perception," Diallo corrected. "Connection. Your fluctuations aren't random. They follow emotional states of their creators." Xerithia's crystalline form flickered with surprise. "Impossible. Saphraxians abandoned emotional variability millennia ago." "Nothing is ever truly abandoned," Diallo replied. "Sometimes it's just forgotten." Captain Chen, preparing for the final and most dangerous trial, received reports of both Wei's and Diallo's successes. 2 trials completed successfully, unprecedented in Saphraxian history. Now everything depended on her surviving the deliberately sabotaged spirit trial. Wei approached quietly. "Captain, my transmission reached Earth. They're using acoustic resonance against the Saphraxian technology." "Good," Chen nodded. "But Vaxillian won't accept defeat. He'll kill me in the spirit trial rather than acknowledge humanity as equals." "Then don't try to win," Wei suggested. "Try to transform the challenge, like I did." Chen considered this. The Saphraxians value order and predictability. Their telepathic abilities rely on structured thought patterns. "And humans," Wei prompted. A slow smile spread across Chen's face. "We're beautifully, wonderfully chaotic." The soul chamber glowed with an eerie light that seemed to emanate from nowhere and everywhere. 5 Saphraxian psychic masters arranged themselves in a perfect pentagon around a central crystalline platform where Captain Chen would stand. "The trial of spirit is the ultimate test," Vaxillian announced to the assembled observers. 5 masters will attempt direct consciousness integration with the subject. No non-Saphraxian mind has ever maintained coherence through this process. Chen stepped onto the platform, noting how it hummed beneath her feet. The crystal was warm, almost alive, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. "The human appears calm," remarked an elder. "Perhaps it does not comprehend the challenge. Or perhaps," Xerithia suggested quietly, "she understands it better than we do." As Chen settled into position, Xerithia moved closer to the platform, ostensibly adjusting monitoring equipment. Her crystalline hand brushed against Chen's ankle, transferring a small fragment that adhered to the human skin. "Protection. Limited. Choose when." The fragmented thoughts transmitted directly into Chen's mind. The youngest master, positioned directly before Chen, spoke aloud rather than telepathically, a courtesy rarely extended to non-Saphraxians. "I am Lirithi, first resonator. The integration will begin gradually. Many species experienced distress." "Thank you for the warning," Chen replied, meeting the master's gaze directly. "But I'm ready." Vaxillian gave a subtle signal to the technicians operating the chamber's controls. Unnoticed by most, they adjusted several parameters beyond standard protocols. The sabotage Xerithia had warned about. "Commence integration," commanded Vaxillian. The 5 masters extended crystalline appendages toward Chen, not quite touching her, but creating a field of energy that enveloped her form. The chamber darkened as points of light began flowing from Chen toward the masters, her consciousness being extracted and examined. Chen felt the invasion immediately, 5 distinct presences forcing their way into her mind, attempting to categorize and control her thoughts. The standard procedure would be resistance, which inevitably led to mental collapse as the subject's defenses were systematically dismantled. Instead, Chen did something unprecedented. She opened her mind completely. The masters weren't prepared for this strategy. Rather than encountering organized resistance, they were suddenly flooded with the full spectrum of human experience. The taste of chocolate ice cream on a hot summer day, the heartbreak of lost love, the wonder of witnessing a child's first steps, the adrenaline rush of narrowly escaping danger, the quiet joy of watching stars from a mountain peak. "What is this?" gasped one of the older masters, his crystalline form flickering with distress. Overwhelming, another managed, struggling to process the emotional complexity. In the observing gallery, Saphraxians murmured in confusion as 4 of the 5 masters began to withdraw, their structured consciousnesses unable to navigate the chaotic richness of Chen's unfiltered mind. Only Lyrithi, the youngest, maintained the connection, her crystalline form beginning to pulse with colors never before seen in a Saphraxian. Echoes of human emotion manifesting physically. Fascinating. She communicated directly to Chen. Your mind contains contradictions, joy with sadness, fear with courage, love with loss. How do you function with such chaos? We don't just function, Chen replied mentally. We thrive because of it. Vaxillion, seeing his plan failing, signaled the technicians. Maximum extraction. Now, the soul chamber hummed at a higher frequency as power surged through the system. Chen cried out in genuine pain as the extraction force intensified beyond safe levels. This will kill her, Zarithia protested, but was restrained by guards when she moved to intervene. Inside the mental connection, Chen desperately reached for the crystalline fragment Zarithia had given her, activating it with focused intention. Instead of protecting her as expected, it created a feedback loop, channeling her consciousness directly into Lyrithi's mind. The young master experienced something no Saphraxian had felt in millennia: pure, unfiltered emotional connection. Memories not her own flooded her consciousness. Chen as a child, skinning her knee and being comforted by her mother. Chen graduating from the academy, heart swelling with pride. Chen witnessing a supernova during her first deep space mission, awestruck by cosmic beauty. Lyrithi made an unprecedented decision. Her crystalline form flowed forward, physically enveloping Chen in a protective cocoon as the extraction energy reached lethal levels. What is she doing? Demanded an elder. Stop her. But it was too late. Lyrithi absorbed the destructive energy meant for Chen, her crystalline structure cracking under the strain but holding. The feedback created a psychic backlash that rippled through the Saphraxian telepathic network, momentarily connecting every observer to a fragment of human consciousness. For one brief moment, the assembled Saphraxians experienced something their species had engineered out of themselves ages ago: empathy. The soul chamber's systems overloaded, plunging the room into darkness. When emergency lighting activated, Chen stood unharmed inside a crystalline shell that had once been Lyrithi. As they watched, the shell dissolved, restructuring into a humanoid form that retained its crystalline nature but now pulsed with rainbow patterns. What have you done? Vaxillion demanded. I haven't done anything, Chen replied. She chose. Chaos erupted in the council chamber as Saphraxian elders argued violently, their crystalline forms clashing with discordant sounds that echoed through the vast hall. The unified consciousness that had guided their species for millennia had fractured individual thoughts and divergent opinions emerging for the first time in recorded history. Silence. Vaxillion's mental command reverberated with enough force to crack the smaller decorative crystals adorning the walls. This disruption changes nothing. The human delegation has violated sacred protocols by inducing deviation in a psychic master. Lyrithi, her form still pulsing with new colors, stepped forward. I wasn't induced. I chose connection over isolation. Her voice carried a musical quality never before heard in Saphraxian communication. For the first time, I understand what we sacrificed for order. Heresy, hissed an elder, but murmurs of curiosity spread among younger Saphraxians. Captain Chen, reunited with Wei and Dalo, stood calmly at the center of the storm. Supreme Overseer, we have completed your trials. According to your own traditions, humanity has earned recognition. Recognition. Vaxillion's form expanded with fury. You think this charade grants you equality with the supreme species of the galaxy? No, Chen replied simply. We don't want to be recognized as your equals. We want to help you become ours. The chamber fell silent, even Vaxillian momentarily stunned by the audacity. Wei stepped forward, activating a holographic display from his modified scanner. Your crystalline physiology is perfectly evolved. Too perfect. You've achieved such biological stability that you've stopped adapting. The radiation humans naturally emit doesn't harm you. It activates dormant structures in your crystalline matrix. Impossible, countered a Suffraxian scientist. Our form is the pinnacle of evolution. Evolution doesn't have a pinnacle, Wei explained. It's a continuous process. Your species engineered emotional capacity out of yourselves millennia ago in pursuit of perfect order. But in doing so, you sacrificed the chaos necessary for growth. To demonstrate, he gestured toward Lyrithi, whose transformed crystalline body now displayed intricate patterns that shifted with her thoughts. This isn't corruption, it's awakening. On Earth, the tide had turned decisively. The harmonic resonance fields had not only neutralized the Suffraxian weapons, but had begun affecting the crystalline ships themselves. Fissures appeared in their once perfect hulls as Earth's combined broadcast networks transmitted the precise frequencies identified by Dr. Curry. In an unexpected development, the crystal shards that had fallen like snow began reassembling into new configurations, ones that emitted protective frequencies rather than gathering intelligence. They're adapting, Chowry realized, not fighting our countermeasures but evolving with them. The Suffraxian commander, faced with failing systems and a compromised fleet, received Vaxillian's desperate transmission ordering immediate planetary bombardment regardless of consequences. After a moment's hesitation, the commander made an unprecedented decision. Request denied. We're standing down. Back in the council chamber, Zerithia moved to stand beside Chen's delegation. Supreme Overseer, I formally request a new evaluation of human civilization classification. Traitor. Vaxillian snarled, raising a crystalline appendage charged with destructive energy. Before he could strike, his console chimed with an emergency signal. The fleet commander's face appeared in a holographic projection. Supreme Overseer, we've encountered unexpected developments. The humans have not only neutralized our technology, but have somehow induced our crystalline systems to reconfigure into harmonic resonance with their defensive measures. Destroy them anyway, Vaxillian commanded. That's no longer possible, the commander replied calmly. Our weapons systems have been completely restructured. Moreover, he hesitated. I no longer believe destruction is the correct course of action. Vaxillian roared with rage, directing his charged appendage toward the delegation. But before he could release the energy, his form suddenly froze, immobilized by a resonant tone emanating from dozens of younger Suffraxians who had formed a circle around him. The time of singular rule is ended, Zerithia announced. The hegemony must evolve or fade. As Vaxillian was contained, Chen addressed the assembled council. For thousands of years, you've classified species based on how closely they resembled yourselves. You called it hierarchy, but it was really fear. Fear of difference, fear of change. She gestured toward Lyrithi, who now stood proudly with her new rainbow-hued form. But difference isn't weakness. The very chaos you engineered out of yourselves is what allows humans to adapt, to create, to find novel solutions where established patterns fail. What do you propose? Asked an elder who had remained silent until now. Partnership, Chen replied. Not subjugation. Not even equality in the sense you understand it. Complementary evolution. Your order and our chaos creating something greater than either alone. 3 months later, a joint human Suffraxian science vessel departed Earth orbit, Ital, a revolutionary composite of terrestrial metals and living crystal that responded to the crew's collective intent. On the observation deck, Captain Chen stood with Zerithia, watching Earth recede into the distance. The council reformation proceeds better than expected, Zerithia reported. Already 17 previously subjugated species have been invited to send representatives. It's chaotic. The last word carried not criticism but wonder. Chaos isn't the enemy of order, Chen replied. It's the source of new order, of growth and change. Below them, in the ship's educational center, human and Cephraxian children interacted in ways unimaginable months earlier. A young Cephraxian formed her hand into intricate crystalline patterns that captured sound waves from a human child's violin, transforming music into living light sculptures. Lyrithy, now the first ambassador of transformed Cephraxians, watched the children with what could only be described as joy, an emotion her species hadn't expressed in 10,000 years. This, she told visiting dignitaries, is true evolutionary success. Not domination or isolation, but synthesis, finding strength in difference rather than fearing it. In the vastness of space around them, the starlight reflected off the ship's crystalline surfaces, breaking into countless rainbows that stretched across the void, a fitting symbol for the new path forward. "Where to next?" asked Zerethia, her crystalline form now displaying subtle color variations that indicated her own gradual transformation. Chen smiled, looking out at the infinite stars before them. "Somewhere new. Somewhere we can both learn and grow." After all, she added with a quiet confidence, if two species once thought irreconcilable can become perfect partners, imagine what other wonders are waiting out there. As if in response, the ship's crystal composite hull pulsed with harmonious light as it accelerated toward the unknown, humanity, and the former supreme species of the galaxy embarking together on the greatest adventure of all, shared evolution.